Hopefully, great. Um, I want to thank everybody for being here. My name is Eileen Small. I'm the engagement specialist within Volunteer Services. We have an amazing group of folks today from the Charles River Valley Management Unit who will be leading this evening. What I would ask is if anybody has questions, would you mind placing them into the chat? As we go through, we'll either I'll try and keep track of them. Mike Francis, our stewardship manager from Charles River Valley, will also be helping me with the chat. We'll pause at the end to answer all questions. This way, our presenters are in a nice, easy flow. The other thing that I would ask is if you could all mute yourself, just in case, your dog comes in the room like mine will and starts barking or whatever. So I think at this point, what I'd like to do is hand this off. Mike, did you want to say something first, or should we have
Yes.
Dan jump right on?
Yes, I'll say a few things. Thanks, Eileen. I'm Mike Francis. I'm the stewardship manager in the Charles River Valley. I have a few remarks that I'd like to share. First, I'd like to start by thanking our incredible team of volunteers. They've been very generous with their time and their talent. And as you'll see, they've just accomplished so much and are just integral to the work that we do here. You'll hear about this model, which we feel is a great model for maintaining and improving our trails. And I'm sure you'll be just as inspired as I am by this crew. And also you'll get some practical tips for either creating or joining, creating a team or joining an existing one, and also meeting other people that share your passion for trails. So with that, again, I'd like to just thank the team and thank all of you for joining us tonight. And with that, I'll pass it on to Dan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Ott, and also from our team tonight here are my co-members, Dave Herrer and Hank Rausch, and you'll be hearing from each of them tonight as well. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get into the presentation. Can everyone see my screen? Oh, wait a second. Here we go.
I'll let you know when it shows up, Dan. It looks like we're there. Go for it.
Great. Okay. Well, Mike and Eileen, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's really a privilege and an honor to serve with the guys, the folks on our team, and with the trustees staff, and have the chance to tell a little bit of our story. Let's see, get to next slide here. There are a few things that we wanted to go over with you, and we are trying to address a couple of larger questions which we thought you might be asking. And one of them might be, how did your team come into being over the past three and a half years? And what things made that work? And secondly, what do you do, and what do I need to know to do something like this as well? So with those kind of overarching questions in mind, we wanted to talk about a little bit about who we are, about the team, the method that, the activities that we're cognizant of and working with to engage not only ourselves, but the trustees staff and also new volunteers. Important elements of planning and managing the projects and the work that we do and who's doing what, and pulling from a common source that both the trustees and this team is using. So everybody, and having access, and Dave will talk a lot about that because he really designed all of that work, and it makes a huge difference in structuring our activities and frankly our success. Safety issues, we'll talk briefly about how important that is, but also some of the things that we're doing there. training activities a little bit, and then primarily the kinds of things that we're doing when we go out, the primary activities around the trails and how that's evolved a little bit over time. And then we hope to offer plenty of time for questions. So this is just a map of the Charles River properties, the Charles River region that we work in. And frankly, I think we've done work in almost every one of these, if not all of them. There's about 15 properties, nearly 3,000 acres, and 100 miles of trails. So when we get a good weather system through, there's events that happen within the region, there's an awful lot of opportunity for work to arise. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Our team is made up mainly of 6 to 8 folks. Most of us are retired, but a few of us are still working. We range in age between roughly 50 and late 60s, and have a diverse background of experience and skills and physical strengths. We could use a few more younger backs and legs, I'm just saying. But if you know a few of those, send them our way. We've got a great team with a lot of talent in a lot of different directions. We started as individual volunteers in large part, and came together around a strong interest and commitment to the local trails networks. We are hikers, mountain bikers, runners, and walkers who all want to invest something in what we enjoy so much. So where we are now is at a point where we're beginning to where we started working closely with the trustees staff and following kind of the trustees team's project list. We're now working a little more independently and with direction from the team, from the staff, taking on and working projects with our own team, with our own scheduling and so on, so that there isn't a full-time staff person now required to keep us going. We work together one morning a week, weather permitting. And this last bullet just talks a little bit about some of the things we've done in the last 12 months. 36 projects completed. We put a lot of bog walks on wet ground in this past year. We've taken down and cleaned up a lot of blowdowns, 45 plus blowdowns, and together, put in over 1,000 volunteer hours in that period. On this slide, we want to share with you some of our learnings and thoughts for folks to consider in their own team development. And these are things that we consider we've learned, over the past year and have, added to the effectiveness and the work that we've been able to do together. So if we start with recruiting dedicated volunteers, and that's not a stroke of genius on our part, but what we realized is that if you're able to find and invite like-minded people who have a stake in the local trails network, again, people who are already hikers, bikers, walkers, or birders, or naturalists, those folks have that same stake in keeping these properties in good shape as well, and often want to give back something. And we've heard that a lot from people who see us out on the trail and talk to us as we go by, and a number of them have in fact, joined up or gotten involved in some way, knowing that there's opportunities there. Other things you can do, certainly, and I know that there's a lot of people already doing this in this group of folks, but volunteer when you see a trail event coming up. If you're talking to the staff about future trails projects and they know that you're interested in helping out, it doesn't have to be necessarily a big project, for you to be helpful and to begin getting exposure to what are the priorities and the requirements and the standards that the trustees needs and is looking for from folks that work on their trails. That's been a real important source for us to learn and to achieve the point that we are where we're able to go out and do things on our own. I think another element of what's made us successful is trying to keep an atmosphere that is inclusive and collaborative within the group. We tend to try and check our egos in the parking lot and make sure that we remember that all team members feel like they're valued and they're having the chance to make a contribution. Everyone who's on that team is there by choice. So we try to make it a positive atmosphere and reinforce the fact that the feeling that they're glad that they came. I think that's been important for us. Organize and plan and communicate. Decide the best way to get the word out. Whether that's email or text or other ways that may work for you, but make sure that you're getting the word out on plans and expectations, and be consistent with the communication and timing of those contact points. So again, so people can plan. Another element I think that I've felt like has been helpful is that when people show up, they want to get to work. They want a clear picture of what we're trying to do, but they don't want to stand around while you get organized to get things underway. So try to have safety equipment and tools that are best for the job and have them ready to go when you get to the project. And so when people arrive, they know they're going to be able to get to work quickly. Establishing a regular work day and time is also helpful, rather than trying to do it, keeping that changing from week to week. We do it. Our time is Wednesday morning from 9 until 12, and people are able to build that into their calendar and work other things around it as well. And I think the other thing is making sure that you start on time and end on time, so people can trust that they know what you're asking for. You can't get it all done in one day if it's a big project, and it's important for people to know that there is a good finish time and that you'll honor. Providing safety skills and safety training. This has been really helpful to have the input from the trustees staff. They did that with us as we were coming up in our experience level, making sure that we had our personal protective equipment and we're using it, as well as doing safe things with the tools that we were working with. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I think the other thing is just making sure that's part of your practice every week, every time you're getting together, and then no one is offended that you're getting on them about it in a given project. If you're always talking about it, people will accept that with grace and engagement. I think at this point I want to hand it over to Dave Harrer, and he's going to pick up on planning and communication. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Planning and communication is very important, as Dan mentioned, because we're all busy people and we want to accomplish the most that we can in the limited time we have. And so we've developed a scheme where we can get organized and get out there and, have a work plan ready and to execute and, be able to look ahead, weeks ahead, to try to get materials together and tools and whatever else we need. A key part of our planning and communication operation is our online presence. We've established a presence on Google Drive where we keep a bunch of information and everybody on the team is able to view and edit and contribute the information. It includes project logs, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. Various information the trustees has provided. We put in pictures of trails and work that needs to be done. We've organized a group of guidelines, manuals that are helpful in how to build things or how to fix a trail, that kind of stuff. We have safety information. We have a list of property maps that some of which are like archive maps that have trail intersection numbers on it, which makes it easier for people to identify where a particular problem is. Was a challenge for us, but I think we solved it. And we have contact list that has everybody's email, phone number, whatever. But we also, most of the year we go out once a week and Dan sends out emails outlining where we're going to meet, what time, and what the project is, and always his reminder to bring snack, water, safety equipment, or whatever. And then we get together occasionally, maybe quarterly, for meetings. Sometimes we'll go out and have a lunch meeting, but lately we've been doing a few Zoom meetings. And I listed the link for the Google Drive that everybody could go to that link and see what it looks like. So, maybe if this presentation, a copy of it is made available or whatever, or, we could put this in the chat. You're welcome to visit our site. Now, Dan, next slide, please.
Yeah.
The probably the centerpiece of our communication is what we call the project log, which is basically a spreadsheet, Google Sheets, that was put up on the on our web presence. And I'll just quickly go over this because I think it's a very useful tool for us. It's our main tool. We have something similar for blowdowns, but for the projects we have a little more information. We start out, we give every project an ID. We indicate when it was added and by who, and then we have various statuses that we could flag. Actually, a drop down. It's active, it's closed, and needs to be evaluated, or it's something we need to watch. It could be like a wet area that's maybe wet some of the time, not all the time. So we're trying to keep track of what's going on. We try to give it a priority, and then the trustees staff can comment on the priority, but basically we have low, mid, and high priority. We try to indicate where the property is. That's another drop-down menu. Then the location in the property, try to key it to some trail intersection numbers or trail colors, whatever works. And we try to describe the work that needs to be done. We got loose categories of erosion control, safety, trail hardening. Sometimes we have different types of maintenance, but we'll get into that later in the presentation. we try to list out what resources are necessary. This could be, tools and or materials. Trustees like us to try to estimate the cost of the work. Usually what we do is less than $100, maybe $200 at the most. And then comments and whatever that we can, update or, provide extra information. And then we try to list when the project's closed. And so this is a very useful tool in trying to plan our work, because we can look at this and say, okay, this is what we're going to do next week. This is what we'll do in a couple of weeks. We try to give notice to the trustee staff as far as what materials we might need. Sometimes we'll go out and get the materials ourselves, and the trustees will reimburse us. But I think it's important to keep track of the work we're doing, because we have another spreadsheet similar to this that shows, where all the projects we've accomplished, and after a while it builds up. It gives us some pride in our work, what we've done, but also we see projects that haven't been completed, or that we need to evaluate or watch. This isn't the complete list that you're looking at, but again, if you go on the Google Drive, you can get a better idea of what we're doing. So I think now Hank will talk about our safety and training.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, safety really is important. There's a lot of things here on this slide. I'll highlight a few that I think are important, and a few things that we left off that I thought of late in the process. So make sure you have personal protective equipment. This is particularly pertinent anytime we're using a chainsaw. So that's why there's a hard hat and chaps here, eye and ear protection. But those things are important even, sometimes if you're using a sledgehammer to drive something in, or any other sorts of tools you're using. Gloves, certainly helpful to think about having a second pair. We often are working in wet situations, so that's important. When you think about sturdy footwear, one of the things that we end up bringing along a lot is a good pair of Wellington boots. We find ourselves in mucky areas, or even in the water when we're doing repairs, so that's really helpful to have. In terms of your safe working techniques, selecting the proper tool is really important. You want a tool that's sharp. That will help to make it safer as well, and make sure it's in good repair, that it's not damaged in any way. You want to make sure you're using proper lifting and bending techniques, and when you use the tool properly, lifting or bending properly, you'll get a lot more effective results. That's okay. Circle of danger is listed here, also called the blood circle. It's probably the most important thing on this page. So if you think about it, if you grab a tool and you have it in your hand, if you turn around in a 360-degree circle, you shouldn't be able to touch anybody within that circle. And that way you eliminate the risk of injuring someone else. And when you're carrying tools out in the field, you want to make sure you keep the blade away from yourself as you're going into and out of the work area, just in case you inadvertently stumble. You don't want to fall on the sharp end. And you want to bring things along to make sure that you and your group are safe and ready for the environment that you're going to be in. First aid kit, cell phone's an important safety and navigation tool. You want to make sure you have water and a snack to keep your energy up. Insect repellent, and one thing that was missing here, sunscreen and sunglasses during the summer. Next slide, Dan. So we had some of these already, but really important to have those gloves. They help with your grip. You want to think about that blood circle every time you pick up a tool. You want to look around and make sure there's not anyone that's in your area. that you're swinging the tool. Think about your footing. Unstable footing is dangerous. You want to make sure you have the right tool for the job. For example, if you're taking out a small limb or you're taking out a small branch, you don't need a chainsaw. You can use a pair of loppers or a fold-out handsaw. And it's really important to think about that, because if you're over stressing a tool for a job that's too big for it, or vice versa, you're using a really big tool for a small job, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. We talked about carrying the tool properly on the way in and out, and traveling safely to the destination. And I think that involves communication as well. Sometimes not everybody can show up at the same time, so you want to make sure you really have good communication around what's the location of the project for that day. Next slide. So this is an example of some of the typical trail tools that we use. I'd say the Rogue Hoe is a favorite, really attractive tool for maintaining a trail, building water bars. Pulaski's there has an axe if you need to take out roots, and some other tools that we use pretty regularly: metal rakes, shovels, rock bars, loppers, a folding saw, and a chainsaw. And I'm going to turn it back to Dan. I think you're on this slide.
Yep. So here's a quick review of the kinds of work that we do, and in sort of large buckets. We're talking about maintenance with a number of items there that you can read as we go down. Trail hardening, erosion control, trail creation and relocation, and even beaver control. Hank and I are going to go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. Clearing blowdowns. This is one of my personal favorites, frankly. I think it's a kind of work that it never stops arising, but it's also a good work, and it's important to keep the trails open. All types of problems arise from the variety of blowdowns and downfalls that we have in New England. Examples on this slide show a variety of sizes and complexity, and may require multiple techniques to safely clear them. Without getting into a lot of chainsaw safety terms and regulations, I think my biggest mantra is don't be in a hurry. Make a plan, think about it, think about what the ramifications of the things that you're thinking about doing are, and then be very, very deliberate and thoughtful as you progress. There are so many surprises that can happen when you see kind of a complex situation of a tree crown that's laying across with maybe another tree mixed into it, or maybe something that's leaning and suspended, or other things where you really have to unlayer it to make sure that you're being safe as you approach it, and it will tell you as you progress, if you're on the right track. Generally, you need at least one person who's experienced, equipped, and skilled with a chainsaw, and at least one other person to support and clear away cut branches and wood chunks, and to keep the area safe. There's specific safety equipment standards and skills and equipment necessary for this type of work. So please, if you've just gotten a chainsaw for your yard work, or maybe you've got a small farm or something, or acreage around your home, don't go rushing into the woods to do this kind of work without talking to your staff and making sure that you've got all the right protective equipment, and you're using the tools like a chainsaw thoughtfully and carefully. Frankly, it's great work. It's fun. It's rewarding, but it's also very, very risky or dangerous if approached in the wrong way. The other thing I would say is that for many people who go off into the woods, there's a lot that you can do with a folding handsaw or a small handsaw that you can throw in your backpack. And you may just want to make practice of doing that, because there's a lot of things that you can pick up or clean up or separate from and improve the trail as you're going with a hand tool like that. So just a thought for those of you who are beginning to get into this. New trail construction is another element, and what we've got here are various projects that we've been a part of. Some with a team of full-time staff members, and sometimes with volunteer groups or local groups like scouts or high school students who, in this upper right-hand corner, wanted to create a trail as part of their senior project. And the trail team joined them to help them get the work done. And Seth King here was the staff full-time member who made sure that they were walking down walking through the right steps to make it happen. Elements that go into that trail construction are things like design and layout and flagging the trail. And once that's approved and agreed upon, then certainly clearing and brushing the area on and around and over the trail itself, and then bedding the trail. And as you can see, we're doing in these lower photographs as well. This is a lot of hard work. So invite your friends. You need bodies. You need people with hose and rakes and shovels. But it is rewarding as well, and it's fun to be able to go out and walk the trail that you might have contributed to with your sweat equity to make happen. And I would say it is a very rewarding thing. Interestingly, closing old trails is also part of our work. And one of the things that we've learned is that it's a lot harder than you think to keep a trail closed. Users generally have habits and patterns and preferences that they don't necessarily want to give up all the time. And it is not easy to camouflage an old trail without a significant amount of work. And there are determined users who have come back and undone more work than we've put in to keep that open. But I would say it's important to be able to restore some land for restoration purposes, and take some trails out of use, and that's also part of what we do. Trail hardening is just not unlike what it sounds. Here you see stone and gravel used in a wet, muddy area that needed a surface that was more stable and would shed the water better than what was there. And on the right, we have used, we did a project that involved both check steps as well as progressive steps to deal with a hill with a pretty significant grade that was washing out pretty badly. And bog bridges are another element of what we do. And here you see a pretty simple design of planks with cross beams on either end. And these sit on the surface of the trail. So it's not, unless it's a creek that we're suspending over the top of, these do sit directly on the ground and are, the boards are elevated 4 to 6 inches off the surface. If you get into more water, obviously, and more flow, then you need to start elevating, putting in posts and elevating the walkways, and gets a little more complex. But these do these do great work in a lot of the muddy, wet places that are particularly that are seasonal. At this point, I'm going to turn it back to Hank.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Mhm.
So, sometimes blowdowns are more than just a nuisance that needs to be cleaned up. They can cause damage to bridges and bog walks. I think one thing that this image depicted for me in particular is that as you design erosion control and trail hardening solutions, think about maintenance and repairs. Try to build things that are relatively easy to maintain and repair, but not at the expense of performance. Obviously, you want the whatever you've built to hold up through a lot of different conditions. In this case, this bridge repair was a little more complicated, required some more reconnaissance in advance, as well as a couple of trips, back into town to find the right supplies to repair it. Next slide. So this is an example of some check steps. They're a great way to manage erosion issues on steeper slopes, as Dan mentioned. And this is, I think, another thing to think about is sometimes trail rerouting is a good alternative to putting in check steps. In this case, that wasn't a good option. I'll note on an earlier slide, we saw that there were some steps that were added in this particular location. It turned out that some of the step downs were too steep. So it's really important to reevaluate your projects after they're completed, make sure they're doing what you want them to do, and come back and make repairs if you need to, or additions to make them more effective, and use that learning for future projects. Next slide. Flooding can be a major negative impact from beaver activity. Wire cages that reduce the beaver's ability and inclination to dam outlets is one solution. Beaver management is an area that requires very close partnering with the trustees or any other conservation organization that you might work with due to the required permitting. The goal is to create solutions that support the beaver's habitat while avoiding the negative aspects of uncontrolled damming, such as flooding. Next slide. So this is our last slide for you. These are different examples. We do spend a lot of time on water management. Moving water is a powerful force. And so as we think about trail design, we want to incorporate water management elements up front, or we want to go back and install them. You can see the one that says drainage improvements. There's a little stream that cuts across a trail. And we went back many times to replace the stones there to get it in such a way that the bikers decided that they liked it. And then on the far right, you can see there's water bar and drainage tips. We put these in many different locations. One of the things, though, every time you add one of these drainage tips, you have to go maintain it, which usually means you're out there with a rake or a rogue hoe a couple times a year cleaning it out. If they're not maintained, they become much less effective and they degrade over time. And with that, I think we are ready for some questions. All right, the next slide is questions, Dan, I think.
Yep. So Eileen, back to you.
And look at that. I was able to stop the sharing. Awesome job, everybody. Really, really appreciate what you've done. One question that was asked earlier, and I put an answer in, but I'd like for you all to discuss a little bit. Eric asked, what is your targeted time span for a volunteer effort? Minimum and maximum. Eric says that they usually would work for a 2-hour time period. How do you all manage your work days?
I can speak to that because I ended up doing some of the scheduling and pointing, but our kind of our foundation period really is 9 to 12 on Wednesday mornings. So it's a 3-hour chunk. Occasionally we might run over that a little bit, but very, very seldom. At the same time, we may do repeated sessions. These are not all one one-day projects. In fact, a number of them can be anywhere from 3 or 4 times to some of the bigger projects might take 6 or 8, 6 or 8 weeks, depending on the size and scope and what kind of resources we might be, we might need. One of the pictures in the trail hardening or trail maintenance section showed a mini backhoe up at the top of the trail. We employed one of the trustee employees who leased that machine to help us get through the heavy rock that was in that area to actually be able to sink those check steps. So that's unusual, but it is done when necessary. And we had Ronan with us to guide us in that and help us with that project on the backhoe for a couple of days.
If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. I'm also scanning you all just to see if anybody is raising their hand or is unmuting themselves. But meanwhile, I would like to ask a question. And I think it'd be kind of fun if you could each answer. Were you all experienced trails folks? Beyond using the trails, did you know what you were doing when this all started? Hank, why don't you go first?
Sure, I can start. So I had done a few trail days with the Friends of the Wapak Trail up in New Hampshire before starting to do some things with the trustees, but pretty limited, maybe 2 or 3 times. So the training that we've had along the way has been really helpful.
Dave, why don't you go next?
Well, I'm an engineer, so I always know what I'm doing.
And you're always right.
No, seriously, I have experience in civil engineering, and I've also done some trail work over the years. So I find it challenging to look at a particular problem and try to figure out good economical and expeditious way to solve it. Also, I've read a lot of books and handbooks, and we put a bunch of them up on our website that there's a tremendous amount of information out there. Most states have guidelines on trail construction and trail maintenance, and the Forest Service, the Appalachian Mountain Club. It's just too much to count. We put like 2 or 3 of the better ones on our Google Drive, but I think, and then hanging around with the other members of the team, you're always learning from each other and from the staff, trustee staff, and I think we get up to speed pretty quickly, and have developed an efficient way to conduct our work.
And Dan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I was, an active trail user and an outdoors person, but I had never really cut or developed or worked on trails myself, and really didn't have any experience in that. But I actually met Dave and Eli Rohina out on the trail one time on my mountain bike, and saw them doing blowdown work, and that's how I first, Eli said, call these folks at Powysset and tell them that you want to get involved, and that's really how I then connected. When this team started to form, Eli moved out to the Fruitlands in a new role, and we started working with a young guy who was really terrific for us at that time, a guy named Seth King. And Seth had had done a lot of trail work, had a lot of great experience, and he was a great teacher. And we laugh about some of the things that Seth ingrained in us, but we learned a lot, and I think that was very helpful to get us to the point where we felt like we could cut a trail. we could do that with thought and with good principles in mind. And so I would also say the trustees have offered trail resource training to us through other outside agencies that have particular training opportunities in mind. And Mike, I'm trying to remember the name of the group that we did this spring, but they offered, a great course on chainsaw skills for trail stewards, taught by a guy named Walker Corby, who used to actually work for the trustees, I think, for a good while. And then there were also other trail design, trail maintenance, water flow seminars and things like that that were very helpful as well. So
Thank you, Dan. One question came in from Rick. And so, Mike, this might be something that you would be able to address. Have you ever experimented with volunteers self-scheduling their time to independently walk trails and then report issues or fix them on the spot? Mike?
Yeah, sure. We have, and it's worked out pretty well. So this is really one huge component, one of the main baseline models of our trail work, right? But we also have, in addition to this trail crew, and I should say each of the members of this trail crew, independently are on the trails, going for a hike, a bike. They're reporting larger issues, and they're also taking care of some, smaller blowdowns just on their own, or making note of trail needs to come back to. But separate from this group, we have a number of independent volunteers, property stewards, trail stewards, and I know across the trustees, the titles may vary a little bit, but the same kind of, the same core of the work is common, and that's that they're taking photos, sending a text, an email, a phone call, dropping in the office, really whatever method works best for them. We appreciate, all the extra eyes that are on our trails, and reporting trail signs that are missing or trail signs that are vandalized. And they're part of the whole system that works really well. And I should say, even just individual visitors to our properties, we have a pretty easy way to get in touch with the trustees, whether it's directly through the local office or to the state contact, email or phone number, and those messages get funneled, down to us.
Okay.
So a lot of ways to be involved.
I have a similar question from Kate and Sandy, and I'm just going to kind of lump them together. Would you ever consider weekend or evening work sessions to engage younger trail volunteers? And Sandy asks, how do we recruit younger folks if most of this work is being done during normal business hours? Anybody have any input on that?
So I'll take a stab at it. So one thing I know is that the trustees actually schedule trail days, official trail days, right, where they have sessions where they're doing repairs and working on trails. So that's one way for people to engage. One of the other things I'd say is that there actually have been a few younger folks who have come in from time to time and done some work with us. They're able to flex their schedules, their work schedules, that sort of thing. But that's a good comment. I mean, it is something that we could certainly think about. I don't know, and maybe this is something that Mike could speak to, but I think so far the experience is that most of the people that come looking for this kind of work are, recently retired and saying, hey, I want to give back. Is there some way I can do this? But, maybe there's younger folks that reach out too. I don't know.
One thing that I would add is we occasionally will have younger folks come directly through volunteer services, and we'll work with individual properties or staff members to see if we can either put together like a group, a school volunteer day. I know that some schools like Oliver Ames in Northeastern. They do a senior project. The Hingham High School does the Harborman in April. So we do try to engage younger folks. Mike, did you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Of course, most of you probably know about Scout projects, particularly, Eagle Scout projects, and on occasion Gold Award projects. And that's been a really great way to for us to connect with those youth. So it depends on what age you're thinking about, whether the youth are like school age, like high school or younger, or whether they're college, in college, or whether they're out of college. And we've had work days, we've had national work days on National Trails Day, and that's drawn a pretty wide range of volunteers. It just depends. There are many ways to approach trail work, different models, and I think what's worked really well here is just the level of commitment, because folks on this call, Dan, Dave, Hank, and others that are part of that team, because they have a lot of flexibility, and frankly they come out weekly, and sometimes more frequently than that. It's just been an overwhelming level of support that we've gotten from this group. So we do work with volunteers in other ways, but this is really a model that's really progressed so far above and beyond what we could have hoped for.
I'm going to ask another question. It's kind of a conglomeration between Mark and Bob. Mark asked, can you say more about how you work with staff or other landowners to design solutions and obtain needed permits, especially around wetlands? And then Bob added on, does your project log match with or follow Charles River Valley's management plan for a given property? Anybody want to tackle that?
Sure. So I can talk about the managing to the log. So early on when we got started, we didn't have the Google share site, and so we were working off of the CRV log for their projects and the things that they were working on. And Dan had indicated earlier that Seth King, who was sort of our ringleader at that point in time, was directing us a lot more. So he was our trustees handler, for lack of a better word, and would help us figure out what's next. And then as things have evolved, we've become more independent. We've got more skills around being able to create our own projects. But Dave Herrera, who had to drop off to go to another meeting, Dave's been good about combing through the trustees project log and making sure it lines up with our log. And Mike Francis does that as well. So we are working to make sure that we're aligning what we're doing, and that we're giving high priority to the projects that the trustees are focused on. Yeah, I don't know if I guess.
Mike, do you want to address the one about permits and getting into neighbors and stuff, because I think that's really where you.
Yeah, and I can also touch back on the other one too. But first, the permit question. If it involves wetlands, then we're working with the local conservation commission. There's a lot you can talk about and that on that topic. But I think Hank pointed out earlier the working whenever we install beaver culvert fences, that's requiring coordination with the Conservation Commission. The bridges, the bog bridges, things like that. If it's something new, that's something to consult with the local Conservation Commission. And this team would work with myself or other trail staff to get involved with those the permitting. Back to the question about the project log. Just one thing I wanted, to point out there is that many of you are possibly aware that the trustees has a set of baseline trail standards. I won't really go into the details of that, but the trails are assessed against those standards on a 3-year cycle. And so out of those assessments, anything that's not meeting our baseline, we would create work orders. And those work orders also make up part of that project log. In addition to those types of trail needs, as you've heard, our volunteers are identifying additional, needs that they see, within that 3-year cycle. So a lot can change on the trails, and a lot of things can pop up, or just other ideas that come about. So the work on that project log is really made up of both, work orders tied to our baseline standards, and then other needs that are skilled volunteers, notice when they're on the trails.
I think we have time for one more question, and I think that this is really valuable. Eric asked, has any effort been made to document your efforts with a before and after video of trail repair? I think this might motivate people to support the overall work of the trustees while enlightening them to your trail work. Anybody?
Yeah, we don't have a videographer on staff on our team, so we haven't done, other than just casual personal pictures and things like that we've passed along, that kind of thing. But I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure, be interesting to see where that would be useful for communicating to prospective volunteers, like what you're doing, Eileen, or in promotional pieces, things like that. I will say we get a lot of feedback from people who use the trails on a regular basis, and they're incredibly appreciative. It's really remarkable, I think, how much people notice and how positive they are in terms of response times when things happen and then when they get fixed. And I think it demonstrates to them that the trustees really care about really care about keeping things, in good shape. So that's been rewarding, certainly, just but I also think it's been, a plus for the trustees that, people see the work in the trails that they walk sometimes, multiple times a week, issues getting addressed. And I was going to say, one of the things that we did as a team was, we all live in this area, but frankly, Hank lives in Sherburne, Dave and Needham, Paul's in Norfolk. We even personally, we've adopted kind of, survey or eyes on responsibility for particular properties within our system, either favorite properties or places that we go most frequently. And so in that individual approach, we surface more of these things that we see on a regular basis and put them on the log, and they become projects for the future. So to the gentleman who made that point, individuals can do this themselves. Absolutely. You can start with that, and encourage that, and support that. But when you begin to get some more folks together, there are things that you can do that one person can't take on themselves, and that's fun as well.
I do want to make an observation. Hank, Dave, and Dan and Mike have been talking about how hard the work is, and oh my God, we need some younger folks with good backs. These guys have fun as well. All right. I know they hang out afterwards and they have lunch, and sometimes they get together. Am I off base in saying that you have created friendships amongst yourselves and other volunteers that join you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, definitely.
Right.
We're a little light on the lunch and the libations and all that stuff. I haven't done that nearly enough.
I'll work on that for you, Dan.
Yeah,
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I think there's a real camaraderie, that goes to making the work and the projects, much more enjoyable.
We are a little bit over time, and I do want to be sensitive to everybody's personal life. I really want to extend an amazing thank you to Mike Francis, DA, Dan, Dave, Hank, Paul. You all are just incredible, and thank you for your time and your effort. I will be sending along a survey to anybody that either signed up or is here. I would appreciate if you would give us feedback. Feedback is good, positive or negative. There's also the opportunity for anybody that would like to be in the part 2 of the hands-on trails training. We have a couple of days and times as an option. This is not a confirmation of your joining. We'll kind of take a poll and see where most people can join us. And then we'll reach back out with the actual sign up for those days. I put the volunteer email address, my email address, and Mike Francis's email address inside the chat. I didn't want to share all your personal emails, Dan, Hank, and Dave, but any questions that we didn't answer, please reach out to us. Thank you. I'm going to ask Dan, Hank, I know Dave is left, and Mike, if you wouldn't mind staying on just for a few minutes for us to be able to wrap up. And everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. And I also want to extend the thanks to Eileen and the volunteer services team. I think you all know how incredible they are too. So thank you. Thank you, Eileen.
Great job. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.